This is an image of the expression less than 3, or a heart. And here's the same image, only I've been, well, scrambling it a bit. Can you still see the heart? If you answered yes, I'd have to believe you're lying. In fact, the phases of the waves that make up an image are just as important as the intensity, if not even more. Hopefully, you're just like me and only needed 1 or 2 examples to realize that the phases of the waves are crucial. And around 20 years ago, in 1995, Philippe Refregier and Bahram Javidi realized that this could be utilized. Suppose that you project an image onto a glass slab with varying thickness. At different places of the slab, the light traversing it will experience different changes in phase, since it takes longer for the light to travel through glass than air. What you get after the slab is this distorted image. Although the distortion is well defined, we can just analyze the glass slab to quantize the scrambling effect. Since we then will know how the slab scrambles our image, we consequently know how the distortion behaves. With this knowledge, it is possible to reverse the phase changes, essentially undoing the scrambling. If someone else would get the scrambled image, but not know how to undo the scrambling, the information in that image would stay hidden. This is the general idea behind so-called optical encryption. Through the last 20 years, several different methods have been invented in this field, but in this video, we will dive into one of the oldest, but still very robust techniques. For someone without prior knowledge of waves and optics, this might sound like taking a bowl of soup, and by undoing the recipe, you could undo the soup back into its original ingredients. While I think that's possible theoretically, but never in practice, this really is in both. It might sound complicated, but the setup is fairly straightforward. A picture, or if we stay to conventional terms, an object, gets illuminated by a collimated and polarized laser beam. Immediately after, it passes through one of 2 so-called phase masks, which alters the phases randomly, just like that glass slab mentioned earlier. This encrypts the object in the space domain. A certain distance later, it passes through a lens. At the focal point of the lens, we've split the constituent waves apart with the lens, so we're in the Fourier domain, where we make the image pass the second phase mask. Now we've encoded the object in that domain too. Finally, the beam travels through a second lens and gets registered by a detector, either a holographic film or a camera. This is the complicated half of the system, but an equally important part is a reference beam that will interfere with the encrypted beam at the camera. This is to capture both the magnitude and phase of the object wave. Creating a reference beam is achieved by splitting the beam before the encryption process. On a small side note, see how the object beam travels through 2 random, but to us known, phase masks, which is why this is called a double random phase encryption setup, or DRPE. Also, any distance between a lens and another item has to match the focal length f of the lenses. You can see these distances here, 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 and here. That's why this is also a 4F system. Alright, so this is what it looks like on paper, and in the lab the setup looks like this. The polarization and collimation of the laser happens in this area. The encryption occurs here, and the reference beam travels behind the camera here. In the lab, I found these small Petri discs on which I could draw these tiny figures, including the heart that we're going to encrypt. My first phase mask is this diffuser, while the second phase mask is a spatial light modulator, or SLM. For now, it doesn't look like much, but putting a polarizer on top of the screen reveals the phase mask underneath. Here's what it looks like if it is converted to a color scheme. It was created using Python, by the way. Playing around with my setup, I soon noticed that during encryption, The reference beam maintained a much stronger intensity as it traveled towards the camera, so I also added some shaded glass to attenuate it. With this setup, I could reach the result you could see in the beginning. The original image and the encrypted image. This takes us to the obvious follow-up question. How does the decryption work in this setup? Well, it doesn't. In the decryption process, the idea is to let the encrypted image be our new object, and the face masks will be inverted, thereby undoing the phase shifts introduced. This project's main focus has been on the encryption part, and on top of this, the necessary items to create both an encryption and decryption setup were unavailable.